Paul Ryan, who ran as vice presidential candidate for the Republican Party 3 years ago, was asked today if he would like the job of Speaker of the House of Representatives with the resignation of John Boehner, and Ryan's response was, "No, it's a job for empty nesters." In other words, I've got little kids at home, and somebody who's a little older and their kids have grown up and are already out of the house, perfect job for them. And right now there's some talk, Kevin McCarthy, who was, I believe, a Californian, maybe the successor, but that's really coming from the mainline Republicans. McCarthy has been one of those. I really do think that there's going to be quite a floor fight before all of this is said and done, and that the new leader, the new Speaker of the House of Representatives, could well be someone, as I said, who came out of that 2010 election or since. And that was the big inversion election where Republicans seized control of the House, won a massive amount of seats, nearly 70, and have been on the move ever since, but taking the House in an entirely new direction, one that the good folks in the establishment media don't like, because it's traditional. It's not, it's not the new style or fashion. What they would like is they'd like some homosexual to come in there, denounce Christianity, and say we're going to turn the country into one giant bacchanalia. I really believe that. That's what mainstream media would like, and they say, oh, how brave of him. Oh, what a wonderful, brave statement. And we now need to get behind him. And also, we hope that he's a communist, too. 8 minutes after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Who's being accused of being a communist this week? Well, Pope Francis. And I had a caller in the last hour of the program, of course, and a lot of people like that feel exasperated with the guy because they feel that he is a redistributionist. That is, he thinks that we should take wealth from some people and give it to others. Now, I don't really know if that's exactly what he's saying, but that's often how it comes across. On the other hand, apparently liberals don't like him either. I picked this up yesterday from Eric Erickson, who's a talk show host at WSB in Atlanta and also the founder of RedState.com. And he said, I had my studio headphones on listening to the chatter of the reporters when suddenly, distinctly, I heard a reporter say she wanted to take off her shoe and throw it. This was while the Pope was entering the House chamber yesterday to speak to a joint session of Congress. And he says, I don't know who this reporter is, but it would be interesting to find out. Erickson's not making this up. This popped up on CNN as the anchor, Wolf Blitzer, backed off, and they were just listening to some of the natural sound coming out of the House. Take a listen for a moment. So it may not be all that clear over your radio, but she said, I'd like to take off my shoe and, throw it at him. And that tells you right now that somebody in that crowd, likely a reporter and not a member of the House or the Senate, likely a reporter from one of the big television networks or one of the big East Coast newspapers, is responsible for that comment. But no one has come forward and said, well, yeah, okay, it was me. It was me, sure, okay. But I think what's going to happen, there will be an effort by people to try to identify who that is. Remember, we mentioned this the other day, the guy that got up last week at that town hall meeting in New Hampshire and accused the president of being a Muslim, and Donald Trump didn't say, no, don't say that. That would be hurtful and mean. And, Trump didn't have a reaction one way or another to what the guy said. And all of these people said, oh, Donald Trump should have stood up and protected the president. He must be a racist if he doesn't. A typical knee-jerk media response. Nobody's identified that guy either. There was a comparison made when Joe the plumber was standing outside his house and he was raking leaves, and President Obama came along and he told him, I disagree with your policies. They gave that guy a rectal probe over the next several days. We knew every detail about his life as if it was anybody else's business. And yet they won't tell us who this guy was in New Hampshire who asked that question, raising the possibility that it was actually a plant from the Democrat Party. Sometimes we get callers like that on the air here, and they go off and they say all of these things, and I just, yeah. But if that be the case, who is this reporter as well, and why isn't there an effort by establishment media to track down one of their fellow traveling leftists so that we can identify them and find out who is actually reporting and being, how shall we put it, not being objective in their coverage of Pope Francis. There was a story out on Daily Caller today that says there's a reporter working at MSDNC, and the reporter's wife is an employee of Planned Parenthood, and the reporter has been doing all of the Planned Parenthood stories for that very left-leaning network without divulging the fact that his wife is getting a paycheck from them. I think that would be called, when I was in college, I was not necessarily in the J school. I only had a couple of those types of courses. But I think that would be called, if you were to look at it, that would be called perhaps a very serious affront to the ideals of journalism. It's 9:12. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story 55. This is News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We have a caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill.
Morning.
Hey, we're all in the same boat. There's not enough love. There's not enough caring. And
okay.
we need to all get together and not let this stuff happen and just share each other's love and also get rid of all this crap that's going on in the United States. That's all I'm going to say, Bill. Thanks, and have a great day.
Well, thank you. And I extend that invitation to all ladies between the ages of 18 and 60. Well, I'm a newcomer to town, after all. I don't really know anybody. Speaking of Pope Francis, it's not a very good segue, is it? Bjorn Lomborg is writing at the New York Post. Who is Bjorn Lomborg? Well, he is a climate scientist, and I first read Bjorn Lomborg's work several years ago in the Washington Post. He says all these efforts to curb climate change are going to bankrupt the world. He said there are much easier fixes. He said sea levels will rise, temperatures will get warmer, these things happen. But he has been promoting several easier fixes that we could do instead of essentially shutting down the worldwide economy and starving billions of people. He says that the Pope has to realize, and this is just a few facts he's passing along. Lomborg says, do the world's poor believe that carbon cuts are a top priority? Since March of 2013, the United Nations has sought citizens' ranking of 16 policy priorities. More than 8 million people have participated, with nearly 3 million living in the least developed nations. In fact, an education is the top priority for the world's most disadvantaged, followed by better health care, better job opportunities, an honest and responsive government, and affordable, nutritious food. In other words, if you Westerners would stop making all of that ethanol to blend into your gasoline, we could eat that corn. And he writes, both for the entire world and amongst the worst off, climate comes 16th out of 16 after 15 other priorities. It's not even a close race. So, if Francis would really like to help the world's poor, then let's figure out how to give them jobs, affordable food, and governments that aren't corrupt. And if we could do those things, they'd all be a lot happier. And then later on, we could worry about, building a couple of new dikes around the rising waters, or a dam here or there. Or perhaps we could say, all right, we'll resettle some people over here versus here. There are a number of options that we could handle with all of this. But clearly, I think that he is missing that point, and that is what the writer is trying to say. He's well-meaning, but he needs an education in science and economies. And he may have a lot of brilliant people around him, but apparently the message isn't getting across. And then I happen to be reading Peggy Noonan about him today. Peggy Noonan is a very devout Catholic, former chief speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. She's writing at the Wall Street Journal. She says, the less lovable Pope is, well, and I say this still with love, Uncle Frank in the attic. And he does kind of seem like that sort of befuddled old uncle when sometimes you see him on television. She writes, this is the one who endorses secular political agendas, who castigates capitalism in language that is both imprecise and heavily loaded. He doesn't actually seem to know a lot about capitalism or markets, or even what economic freedom has given and is giving his own church. And she's writing about a fellow that she talked to. She says, for one small example, the other day, Stephen Schwartzman of the Blackstone Group gave $40 million to the Catholic schools of New York, meaning he is giving his personal wealth to pay for the education of children, many of whom are recent immigrants and some of whom sleep in cars. Last I looked, she writes, Mr. Schwartzman was not a monk or a mystic, but a businessman in private equity. So yes, there are people of good hearts, and a couple of different writers. Timothy Carney, who is a very conservative writer, has a column at Washington Examiner today, and he's saying much the same thing. Look, there are good people out there. They will give. They will try and help the poor. You don't necessarily need to come in and say, all right, your government needs to take this from you so that we can give it to someone else. And if you set a really good example, if you're a religious leader and you set a really good example, there will be people who follow it. You don't need to coerce them. And that's a message I think that he could have better explained to him, and then he could better explain it to the public when he's speaking either in a public setting or before the House of Representatives and the Senate or before the United Nations. It's 9:17. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Yeah, Kyle, wherever I was going with that, I'm not sure. At newsradio1310.com, you can reach our program today by dialing 736-0300. That is 736-0300. We have a guest in a couple of minutes. She's going to share with us details about a book she's written. And I dare say it, she's a Christian author. So all of you lefties out there who monitor the show every day, you probably better turn us off for 10 minutes because you might hear it, there might be a bolt of lightning, and you might suffer some sort of conversion and actually save your soul. And I know your master, of course, already feels it's his. We have a caller with us. You're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX. What's up?
Hey, Bill. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing a couple days ago when this discussion about the United States of America being so great, so rich, and how can we help the world? Help the world by making more societies like America, for crying out loud. You know, if we can teach people, look all around the Magic Valley, we're farmers, and we make food, we feed people, and I think that's how it should be.
I think we could do it, though, but we could do it without a lot of the regulation that's currently strangling this economy.
Yes.
In other words, we don't need Sally Jewell coming in here saying that, puffy little birds out there are going to all die off, and therefore we need to close off all of the habitation to human activity. Those types of things. Look, farmers and people like that, conservation, they know that they need to do it because that's how they're going to continue to make a living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm thinking in a general term with just the Pope wanting to, whether you believe he wants to redistribute wealth from countries like America, and we're at the top of the pecking order. I mean, let's make more Americas as compared to, taking from the ones. I mean, let's recreate other countries like us.
Yeah. Notice he's not asking the Chinese to do any of this.
Exactly. No, he's asking us to do it. And we're always receptive to that, aren't we?
Hey, thank you much for the telephone call. Well, yeah, that's because we're sometimes, we're nice people. The Chinese, I'm sure the average Chinaman or woman is a very nice person, but the people who run that government, not so much. And next week when they come here, their vassal will Mr. Obama will welcome them with open arms and not criticize any of those issues whatsoever. Oh, and he won't have, gay nuns and other people on the White House lawn at the greeting like he did with the Pope.